What is up, fellow sickos? I am Dan Favale coming at you with, you guessed it, another 2024-2025 NBA season look ahead. We're on to the Oklahoma City Thunder, so I got to be joined by the uncontesteds Taylor Peterson and Jacob Kniffen. We talk a lot about the Thunder. I think this one ran over 90 minutes, if I'm not mistaken. We did, however, record it, which is why I'm redoing the intro before the Kenrich Williams right knee surgery news. He's now probably not going to be ready for a training camp, so we got into a little bit with him. I don't think it changes the overall outlook. It definitely doesn't change much of what we said. And also, we recorded it before the whole Isaiah Hartenstein's trainer or whatever being in the IG comments saying the plan is to start him and Chet together next season. We'll see how that shakes out or whether it's more of a matchup thing, but found that fascinating. So keep it in mind as you're listening to this. Also, if you're new around these parts, remember to subscribe. Apple, Spotify, those are the best spots, as well as YouTube. Those are all the three platforms where you can do us the most solid. Ratings and reviews on Apple go a long way towards helping us get exposure. So please, if you haven't done that, even if you don't use Apple, just go and do it. Write an awesome 5-star review. I would appreciate it. And on YouTube, flood the comments. You guys have actually been doing a really good job. I don't mean to sound surprised with flooding the comments. I want to continue to see more of it. The comments have seemed to help bump up the algorithm, the likes and the comments, to get some of the longer form videos some more views. So we really appreciate everyone who's done that, doing that. Do the same thing on our shorts, which continue. They're not bombing, but they've died down of late. So if you can go to our feed, just go comment like wild on all of our shorts. We heart you for that. If you are doing all those things or have done all those things, tell people about us, share the content, the whole nine. Purchase our merch. You could support the show. It's endorsed by Caitlin Cooper. I don't know, do you get a better endorsement than her purchasing a Hardwood Knocks shirt mid podcast? I don't know if we can. But that's enough out of me. Please remember to subscribe to the Uncontested and follow all those dudes over there. The links to where you can subscribe to the Uncontested, as well as the social media profiles of Taylor and Jacob, will be in the podcast and YouTube description. That is enough out of me, though. Let's talk loads and loads about the forthcoming season for the Oklahoma City Thunder. Taylor, Jacob, welcome back. You guys are running it back consecutive years for the Oklahoma City Thunder look ahead. Nick is ducking the Hardwood Knocks podcast. I don't know what that's about. But thank you guys so much for coming back. Now I have to, this is the first 3-person look ahead we've done, so I have to delegate. Let's start. Jacob, how are you doing?
I'm good, man. We are in the dog days of the NBA summer. I'm glad football's back, but there is nothing to talk about the NBA so far. Gigi Jackson's foot, maybe. Evan Fournier signing overseas. I need NBA content, so very glad to be here.
Give me Jetty Osman's 5 best destinations in free agency. Still floating around.
Oh my God, we're not doing that, brother.
Taylor, how are you?
It's already going to be a 2-hour podcast, Dan. We don't need to go through that. Doing really good. Super thankful for you having us back on. We can't wait to return the favor, hopefully with you and Grant both. And like Jacob said, it's exciting. You know, with football season, it's always fun to have something to hold us over until the NBA. But you inviting us on this show just was a reminder that we're getting closer and closer to training camps and the season officially starting. So we're almost there.
It's funny. People keep saying that to me, and it's actually not true because I'm so far ahead of schedule with the rate at which I'm recording these that you actually have longer to go than you think before the start of the NBA season. I hate to be the bear. Maybe by the time this releases, it'll be so close and that
that's
you'll be
fair.
able to feel it. So the OKC Thunder did some stuff, but to reflect on last season a little bit, where Sam Presti lied to us, talked about like maybe they might have already taken some wins from the future, and they end up being basically the second best team in the league. When you look at how last year unfolded relative to what then happened this offseason, did that sort of align with your biggest takeaways from last year or biggest concerns or just goals? God, I got to do this. Remember, Taylor, let's start with you.
No, okay. Little inside baseball here. Jacob and I are texting each other like we got to be concise and we'll delegate if we need to. So Jacob was ready to go. But no, I think for me and Jacob, I can't wait to hear your thoughts as well. But obviously, we exceeded expectations, or for us, the Thunder exceeded our expectations. Just being one of the youngest teams in the league. If you look at the regular rotation players, their average age, they were the youngest amongst all players, all teams who had players playing, I guess is the way you would phrase that. And for them to be able to come out and perform like they did and exceed those expectations, just be the first seed in the Western Conference, which is, I mean, this year it's going to be even crazier than it was. We'll get into that, but in incredibly competitive Western Conference. They're the first seed in the West. They're the youngest team to ever sweep and therefore also win a playoff series. And then obviously take the Dallas Mavericks and go toe-to-toe with them and Luka, who has the experience. Like, there was a lot of positives to take away from last season. We certainly didn't want to reflect too much on the negatives when we were doing some postseason takeaways.
Jacob, that aligns with what you're thinking?
Yeah. So, I mean, Dan, when we got to the end of the season last year, my thought on the team, I think externally, people who don't follow the Thunder as closely would have said at the end of last season, they need to go get an Isaiah Hartenstein. They need to get a big to play next to Chet. They need to replace Josh. I think those types of conversations were happening in large NBA circles. For me, I originally looked at it as the missing piece is a big wing who can play defense and shoot. There was rumors at the beginning of the offseason of a guy like Patrick Williams from the Bulls. And those types of ideas intrigued me because I believe the future of this team is Chet Holmgren at the 5. Did they have rebounding issues? Yes, obviously. Did they have some size issues? Yes, obviously. Did at the end of the season, there ended up being a little bit of a Josh Giddey issue, which I wouldn't say it was a Josh Giddey issue as much as it was a Josh Giddey fit in Oklahoma City issue, for sure. But as the offseason has progressed and they've obviously secured Isaiah Hartenstein on this team, Alex Caruso on this team, which, hey, representation matters. And we now have a bald white guy on the Thunder. And I feel seen for one of the first times in my NBA podcasting career. So, but you look at kind of how the team is built now. Do I still wish they would have got a big wing? Yes, but I think the avenue to do that.
You greedy MFer.
I know.
Doesn't team have enough?
But
we need, Dan, is another top 5 pick.
Hey, the Clippers might hand it over.
Might get one.
But the cost at which to get a big wing in this current CBA, where I think trading large amounts of future draft capital for a higher salaried player is actually like a really bad plan for a team like Oklahoma City. I kind of love what they did, and I think they addressed issues in maybe a non-conventional way.
I would say that's fair. I think I would agree with everything you said. It just seemed they checked most of their biggest concerns without giving up a first-round pick. It's just like how you would nutshell their offseason, which is like, let's just make this clear. That's fucking bonkers. That this is the team that has 1 trillion picks, didn't have to give up a single one to get Alex Caruso or Isaiah Hartenstein. I want to ask you, though, I've been told there have been complaints that I dictate too many of the terms of these podcasts. They've all come from Grant, so it really shouldn't matter, but I've decided. So I'm going to throw this to you, Jacob. What is and it'll be interesting if you guys have different answers here, but what is the biggest storyline you are tracking for this team next season?
Oh, gosh, that's a heavy and loaded question. There's so many good answers here, right? Like, do they play a 2 big lineup? How do guys progress? What does the closing lineup look like? I'm going to go with my biggest storyline, biggest development thing I'm watching next season is the year 1 to year 2 Chet Holmgren jump. Because I think that jump will be substantial. I wish I had the article up. I do not. But the day that they traded Josh Giddey for Alex Caruso, Woj's ESPN article included a line that talked about how opening up more playmaking and ball handling opportunities on the team by trading away Josh was something that appealed to the Thunder, especially with Chet Holmgren. And I mentioned earlier that I think Chet at the 5 is the future of this team. And I don't want the listeners to get this twisted. I am not saying Chet will be this player. I'm not saying Chet will be this good. Stylistically, I think stylistically on offense, I think Chet Holmgren and Kevin Durant are going to be very, very similar. And I think that is the start of the jump you will see this year. Chet with the ball in his hands more, Chet playmaking, handling out on the perimeter and attacking off the bounce. Chet being the ball handler in a 4-5 pick and roll with Isaiah Hartenstein. I see a lot of KD's style of game offensively in Chet Holmgren. And I think you're going to start to see that leap in year 2. I think the brother just ran out of gas in year 1, honestly.
He mentioned that.
Oh yeah,
on
the what's the Paul
Podcast
George
P
podcast? Yeah,
he said he was shooting laser beams at the front of the rim, and if you go back and you watch any film from the second half of the season, it definitely looks like that. I think
we don't watch games around here, so that's not going to happen.
Hey, narratives only. I'm into it.
So you've been told, right?
My biggest thing I'm watching for next season is the year 1 to year 2 Chet Holmgren leap, because if you told me 2, maybe 3 seasons from now that this team stays intact, but Chet Holmgren is the best player on the team with Shai Gilgeous-Alexander, I wouldn't be shocked at all.
All right. Well, let's get into that a little bit then. So what you kind of mentioned what that could look like, and not to, if you're going to use Kevin Durant as the analog, if you're trying to like sort of zero in on the type of usage that we think will change from Chet Holmgren, like if it's just like a shot type he incorporates or a play type, you mentioned 4-5 pick and rolls. I guess my first question would be, do you actually think that he has the handle or the ability to develop the handle that would empower him to do all of this stuff, where it's like the stuff that Kevin Durant can do with the ball in his hands? He's not Kyrie Irving or Steph Curry with the ball, but like he can navigate traffic, I would say, better than we've seen from Chet. Maybe that's a matter of opportunity, but do you believe in the handle to that degree where it's not just a matter of creating for himself, but you're talking about initiating offense for others at that point?
Is he there now? No. Will he be there year 2? Probably not. Can he get there over the course of the next 3 to 4 years? I think so. I think back to the playoff series where the Thunder played the Los Angeles Clippers, and the Clippers' game plan was let Chris Paul guard Kevin Durant. Doesn't matter that there's an 8-inch height difference there. Chris was able to get under the handle because KD's handle was so long from hand to floor and a little bit looser, and KD's really tightened that handle up. I think it'll be a process for Chet. I think he can get there, and I think that's the style of play he wants to play and that the Thunder want him to do offensively. So I think it'll be a work in progress for sure, but I think it'll get there. Now, again, not saying he's going to be Kevin Durant. I want to make that abundantly clear.
Aggregators, Jacob Kniffen thinks that
Dan's going to clip this and put it all over the HardwoodKnocks socials.
Actually, it is going to be a clip for a larger project, but it'll be out there. So is there then, what is something then specific? Like if you're looking at kind of like, if you look at his shot diet this year, and then if you had to compare it to next year, like what's one area that you would like to see more of them, Jacob? Is it kind of like you mentioned, the pull-ups? Is it maybe he had like kind of at points, like he shot really well on floaters last year? Is it, I'm not a fan of, let's give the ball to him in the post, but maybe developing a turnaround or being able to have more face-up opportunities inside the arc, and not to compare him to Kristaps, but like the ability to just like catch the ball, turn around, face up, and be like, oh, fuck, I'm taller than everybody, I'm just going to shoot this.
Yeah, so the one biggest spot is 3-point attempts.
That's what I had, Jacob. No,
he took completely 4.3 last year. I'm going to be real honest with you. If he takes like 7 this year, I think that's a really good sign.
Well, they could use someone who takes that many. For a team that spaces the floor so well, didn't you guys were the ones that I know this from? Only one player took 5 3-point attempts per game last year. My God.
And that was Lou Dort.
Not Isaiah Joe.
Noted sniper, Lou Dort.
I think you're going to see those attempts start to climb for a handful of those guys. But for Chet specifically, I think off the dribble threes, trail, transition threes, I could see them running some like pin down type of actions and like coming up from the corner type of actions. And then he also has, you kind of mentioned the idea of like not posting him up, but when he catches in that high post area, he actually has a really nice like little turnaround midi fadeaway. He almost goes to like the Dirk, like high knee fadeaway. And I think you could see that a lot more as well. He's got really, really good touch. And like I said, I think last year he ran out of gas. You could just tell the legs were dead. He wasn't getting any arc in his shot at all. I think another offseason, having the full season under his belt really starts to fix some of that stuff. And hey, maybe he takes Paul George's advice and shoots with like a What Paul say, like
The
an
heavy
8-pound
ball.
basketball or something like
Yep.
that?
The weighted basketball. I like it.
I mean, Paul George had like a shit ton of shoulder issues, so I hope Chet consulted
That's kind of where mind went to.
And that was Chet's response to him too, which I found pretty
Oh, did he
hilarious.
say
It's like,
that?
what-
He was like,
like,
your shoulder screwed up?
not specifically, but he alluded to it. He was like, dude, like, what does that do to your shoulders? And I was like, that was pretty good.
Go look at his game logs, Chet.
Yeah,
and-
that's
and
right. You'll find out real quick. Jacob, your first two questions, or your first two answers to Dan's questions, I think were pretty spot on. And you touched on a lot that I have like more specifics on. I think as we go later on through the outline that Dan gave us and some really fun things to talk on. Dan, I apologize. I'm like kind of taking over host duties here. And as Jacob knows from our podcast, I do that way too often. But
You're welcome.
I will just
to do
say,
it.
yeah, just back to like the big takeaway you had, Jacob. I love that you mentioned that because I kind of want to take it a step further. And I had two quick ones, but my main one, and I kind of call it the low hanging fruit, but it's not just Chet for me and his improvement. It's the big three in OKC in general, Dan. Shai, Dub, Chet. I know Shai, was second in MVP voting. Seems like he's a top 5 player in the league consensus. If you ask around, look to all these national media podcasts and articles that they have out there, but he has a lot of growth as well as a player. And so how did these players continue to work on their own games and improve? Like, obviously we want to see J-Dub take a big leap. Jacob just crushed talking about Chet and the leap we want to see from him. How do they do that but still play alongside one another and also within the construct of the team? And let's make it very clear, none of us here in OKC are worried about personalities or these players not wanting to do so. That's not them at all. They want to play within the construct of what Mark Daigneault and Sam Presti have envisioned for this team. More so just them being also incredibly talented and still have so much room for growth. How are they all able to do that together? And that just kind of leads like to my final big takeaway for the season is like, you have these new big additions, like we're about to get into with Alex Caruso, Isaiah Hartenstein, plus playoff experience now under this young team's belt, plus the superstar in Shai and the rising stars that we just mentioned. That equals new expectations. And look, let's be very clear. The Thunder preach about not listening to the outside noise, but just know that it's impossible not to hear those things. And so how does this Thunder team, this young Thunder team, how do they perform in comparison to those external expectations?
It does seem though that, because one of my questions that doesn't need to be a question anymore based on how you guys think that they're going to use Chet is, do they miss the Josh Giddey Chet connection at all? Just because Giddey did a good job of actively looking for him, especially when you look at the share of the passes he threw. Now you take Giddey out of the equation, that's one less person who needs the ball in their hands. Doesn't it kind of just make it, I would say, a non-concern about J-Dub and Chet and Shai Gilgeous-Alexander all being able to play like kind of a starring, like teams just have 3 guys normally that can super teams have 3 guys that can normally operate on ball. And a lot of the times things tend to work themselves out. And so is that like even if there's a player of the 3 that you would be concerned about, like sort of, I don't want to say lost in the shuffle, but seeing their skills being tamped down, is it naturally just Chet because of the position that he technically plays, or maybe even just the defensive workload that he's shouldering, so you don't want to overtax him too much on offense? Be like, Jacob, is there like it seems to me from that perspective, like getting rid of Josh Giddey just takes care of a lot of any of the concern when it comes to the collective development of those 3.
Yeah, I think you're totally right. And you mentioned like the number of passes Josh Giddey made and how many of those are going to Chet. And Josh was great at getting guys to their spots. And I think a lot of folks have this idea that like Josh Giddey's a really bad player. And I just think with the rapid development of the Thunder, the fit just wasn't clean at all. I don't have the stats to back this up, Dan. This is just a he no ball quote, but I think the better connection on the team is Dub and Chet. They developed, like, Dub was the only guy who could complete a lob to Chet Holmgren, but they developed a really, really nice 2-man game, especially with one of them attacking and the other one cutting and being able to find each other. And I think the absence of Josh Giddey opens up shots, touches, passes, opportunities specifically for those 3. And I would say even more specifically for Dub and Chet. Shai's usage, I imagine, would stay the same. I don't think it's going up because of the absence of Josh. So I think those other 2 get even more of an opportunity. And I think putting the ball in Jalen Williams' hand, with Josh gone, I think J-Dub might be the best passer on the team. And I think you'll see a lot more offensive initiation with him as well. So I think the absence of Josh just opens up opportunities for those other two to really grow more naturally into what they want to do. Where, again, I don't think Josh is a bad player, but Josh absolutely needed the ball in his hand to succeed on this team. I think just to succeed in the NBA. And those opportunities were rapidly dwindling in OKC. But you also still wanted to play him. But if you play him, playing him off ball, we saw how that went, right? And it wasn't good. So I think it was just a very natural transition. I actually mentioned this on our show the other day. The trading of Josh Giddey and that opening up more opportunities for Chet and for J-Dub is very similar to me 10 plus years ago when they traded Jeff Green to open up the opportunities for Serge Ibaka.
Okay.
Serge was a little more unknown at the time than these two obviously are. But they got rid of one guy to open up opportunities for another. And I see something very similar happening here with the absence of Josh.
Taylor, so kind of sticking with the big three, J-Dub was working off a high baseline from his rookie season and somehow managed to improve in just so many different areas. But what about his improvement stood out the most? Like, what was the area that you look at? I was like, okay, wow, like this happened. This is a big deal.
So not to sound like a broken record, but let's start with the low-hanging fruit again. Because I think when you look at J-Dub's improvement and his season that he had his sophomore season compared to his rookie year, the dude shot 42.7% from three last season on 3.4 attempts per game. That's up from 35% on only 2.7 attempts from his rookie season. He was incredibly efficient, and he was getting his shots up. And like we already have alluded to, Jacob and I, we want to see more and more of that just in terms from the team as a whole, getting the three-point attempts up. I think that's going to be very big for them moving forward. And for J-Dub to kind of take on that role, that was huge, especially for him to be so efficient. And then something else that I just saw, I'm sure you and some of the listeners saw this as well, Dan, but NBA University, great Twitter account, they tweeted out something today about J-Dub and his efficiency, especially on his pull-ups and his shooting in general. He had 367 pull-up attempts last season, shot 56% from the floor on those. I guess technically that's a field goal efficiency, but that's an absurd number. Not to mention 44% from step-back threes.
The step-back three volume, he like tripled or whatever it was from his rookie season. It was ridiculous.
The shot creation there, just being able to get to his spots, that's huge. But I think you also have to combine that, and this is not so statistical like I just mentioned, but you look at like how he was at Santa Clara and how he was developing as a player. Compare that to this past season of J-Dub, the size that he's put on and the athleticism, like that first step and his improved size and strength are just absolutely lethal. And so, I mean, kind of like Jacob mentioned, it's like a true NBA star archetype. And that's not something I think if you were like a hardcore draft analyst viewing his tape back during his years at Santa Clara that you would have thought he would develop into. Mm-hmm. So for him to take that leap physically and athletically, that's super promising as well.
Is there anything, whether it's what you learned about him from the struggles he had offensively in that Dallas series or just in general that you're going to be focusing on, okay, can he develop? You already mentioned the 3-point volume, but is there anything outside of that? And I will say the one thing, because I need to be a better job of hosting and not really give my opinion, but the variance in cadence to his game, I feel like got so much better from year one to year two, where I didn't not trust him, but didn't view him as like this methodical guy that could break down defenses from all this like different situations. And I think, especially moving forward, this is someone that I think you can trust to just run your entire offense in all these different settings where he's not as dependent on straight lines or having to do these sudden stops. Like there's just so many different counters and I guess directions would be the word to his game. And to see that improvement in 1 year, I know rookies are supposed to improve, but he was just working off such a high baseline. So that turned my head and it made me think the way I framed it on this podcast, like already when we were doing, I don't remember what it was, but a few podcasts ago, which is like the fact that he experienced what he did, like the offensive struggles at points in the postseason. Now, it would almost terrify me as opposing teams to see like what he comes back as in year 3.
So, first of all, we want your opinion, Dan. That's why we have you on the Uncontested podcast in return over the past couple of seasons. I think that makes it really fun. So I love hearing your insight into this team as well. But for me, the two things that stood out during that Mavericks game to answer your question was the playmaking and the assertiveness, because it was his first time there. And like you said, last year, we were talking about Josh Giddey. This kind of ties into that as well. But, obviously Dub was a starter but they would stagger Dub and Shai about midway through the first quarter, and Dub was kind of that lead playmaker with the second unit. It wasn't Josh Giddey, and that was the first like big maybe alarm signal that like, okay, the Thunder are starting to pick up on things with Josh Giddey's fit. It's Dub leading the second unit. They want the ball in his hands. So the playmaking for others, he's going to need to continue to improve, but also the assertiveness in the playoffs. And I think that was just, it's his first time there. He's getting his feet wet, but we know he's capable of so much more in getting to those spots. So Jacob, those were kind of my big two takeaways from the Dallas series, but I'm curious if you have different answers or if you agree or disagree.
Yeah, I assertiveness was one of the big ones for me, and efficiency. I think just when the level of physicality really ramped up and teams really sat down and focused in on him, it's kind of what you expect from a second-year guy in the second round of the playoffs as the number 2 usage player on the team, right? Dan, you mentioned it. Like, yeah, if I'm another team and I see, hey, this kid's in year 2 and he's already gone through the trials and tribulations, and now it's time to come out on the other side. Yeah, that's kind of scary. It reminds me of the first and second year run of James Harden in the playoffs. And then he came out in that finals playoff run where he just absolutely cooked the Dallas Mavericks. And then he went in and won them the series against the Spurs. And it kind of gives me that type of vibes. And he's
Dub
also
is the next Harden, and Chet is the next KD. Shai's the next Russ. You heard it here first, folks.
Shai's the next Russ. That is so mean. Oh man.
How to give Jacob a hard time. I agree with that. That's a good comp.
I think one thing we forget is like J-Dub's like 6'4", like 6'4", 6'5".
I thought he was 6'6". Is he really?
Yeah, he's shorter than Shai, and Shai's listed at like a generous 6'6". The thing is, J-Dub's arms are like, he's got like a 7'3" wingspan.
He's listed at 6'5". All right. I don't know why I thought he was 6'4".
I think he's a little closer to 6'4". But
does being strong make you look taller? Is that a thing? That must be what it is.
Here's the thing is this Thunder team, J-Dub's thick. Dort is thick. They just added Alex Caruso. They just want every single 6'4" dude who will absolutely beat the shit out of you. And they're kind of building that team. Not to get steered too far off track here, but per his Instagram story, Cason Wallace is now up to like 206 pounds, up 13 pounds from last year. So they just want
the Kyle Lowry body archetype at this point. What's going on? Is it all glutes?
Just the and the most generous term possible, just the fattest asses in the NBA. I'm here for it.
No, sorry. The Sixers have they've monopolized that with
that is very, very true. That is very true.
Let's get to the new additions. I'll start with Isaiah Hartenstein. We know all the stuff that he does well. What is Jacob, what's this single thing that you think he's going to impact the most for this Thunder team when you look at his game?
I think, I don't want this to sound disparaging. I think if you ask the average NBA fan, they would say rebounding. They need a rebounder. They got a big guy who can rebound. I think even more than that, it is going to be on offense, the screen setting and the moving without the basketball. This team, they're really, really good. Dan, you know this. They run probably more guard-to-guard screens than any team in the NBA. Maybe any team in NBA history. They love the guard-to-guard screen. They don't screen well, though. They're just so fast and so smart, and their movements are so precise that even if a defender isn't fully screened or you don't get the full contact on the screen, they're still going to get by you, and then the back cut comes, and then the swing pass, and they'll just beat you with the ball. But having a guy who can just annihilate somebody on a screen and spring Shai Gilgeous-Alexander to come off that screen, take one dribble inside the paint or inside the 3-point line and get to that midi, and everybody knows that thing is one of the most dangerous shots in the NBA. Shai is a killer in the mid-range. He's going to get so many more open ones because of the screen setting that Hartenstein is going to be able to provide. And then whenever teams adjust to that and they blitz him off the screen, well, you have one of the best short roll passers in the league in Isaiah Hartenstein. And then whenever they adjust to that, he moves so well without the ball. Whenever I watch Isaiah Hartenstein film from New York this past year, one of the things that jumps off the page to me is he never stands still. He is always in motion. Now, is it baseline to baseline spacing out to three? No. But moving around the paint and just constantly readjusting where he is and being available for easy dump off passes, he's going to feast on that in Oklahoma City. So I think the screening is going to open up so many things for this team, including the other things that Hartenstein does well. That is the biggest thing that I think he's going to contribute, even over the obvious rebounding that he will be able to provide.
So I'm kind of chuckling here, and I want to humor both of you as well as the listeners. I'm glad Jacob went first, because my bullet point here was Jacob can take this one away because he's been spot on all offseason since the signing. The rim protection and rebounding is huge, but he's a great playmaker from the high post, which fits OKC to a T, and an incredible screener. Really a great off-ball player in general. Well done, Jacob.
Yeah, I mean, I would agree with what he says. I think his off, even if you don't think that's going to be his biggest area of impact, I do think that the stuff he does on offense has been, I think you could argue, one, it might have been underutilized at points in New York, but two, I think it's just underestimated by the masses at large. And you look, the short roll stuff you mentioned, OKC wasn't a team like relative to the league average that took a lot of corner threes. That number should go up. And I'm assuming, like, if you look at the on-off splits from when he's on the court with the corner with like 3-point share, I'm assuming there's going to be a massive difference there just because of what he's able to do in that department. So
Can
Taylor,
I sneak something else in there real quick?
No, moving on. Yeah, of course.
You mentioned the corner threes when he's on the court. I'm just going to say it. I think he's going to take some of those corner threes in OKC. If
that
you
was the
told,
question is are they going to let him shoot threes? Because Tom Thibodeau would not.
If he averages 2 3-point attempts a game this season, I would not be shocked.
Damn. I mean, I'm here for it. You guys know how I feel about big shooting threes. So, and he's dabbled in it at some of his past stops. It's just Tom Thibodeau doesn't like his centers to space the floor for the most part. So, so Taylor, the whole Isaiah Hartenstein, Chet Holmgren dynamic, I agree. I think it was Jacob said it before. This team does clearly view Chet Holmgren as a 5. They did give Isaiah Hartenstein, even though it's only 2 guaranteed years, a shitload of money. I viewed it as almost like a tax on, hey, you're not going to be playing a ton of minutes. You're probably not going to be closing a bunch of games. But what is your read or opinion on how they're going to use these two together, maybe in terms of what they're doing on the court, or even just how often are we going to see them go to the dual big setup?
So I mean, again, and this is the ultimate cop-out, but I think it is matchup dependent. I like your point there about it kind of being a tax. I think it's more so like a tax the Thunder had to pay because they're a small market team and you're not likely to attract free agents here unless you're able to pay that kind of money. I think that's what it more so was rather than just the role. But just a quick aside, like when it comes to the starting lineup or even the closing lineup, I think it's going to come down. I've been saying this ever since the Hartenstein and Caruso signings. It's going to come down to it's going to be matchup dependent. And so that kind of leads me into some of like the big thoughts about him and Chet playing together. Like you said, we know, and that's the reason it was kind of a bit of a surprise for us because this Thunder team, Sam Presti, have talked so much about Chet Holmgren being a 5. They view him as a 5 long term, and he's still going to be, even with the Hartenstein signing. That being said, the option to go double big is fascinating, especially when you think about teams like in the West, like the Wolves, even Denver, especially the Lakers, teams like that kind of gave the Thunder trouble last season. But I'm also really curious if it frees up Chet a bit playing at the 4. And again, it's football season, so I have football analogies on mine, but kind of playing like more of like a free safety role on defense, where he's not having to be the defensive anchor down low, but can kind of roam and get more of those blocks. So we see those block attempts go up with Hartenstein around the rim. That's fascinating to think about. And then like Jacob talked and covered so well, I think earlier, what does that look like with Chet in a forward position on offense, being mismatched against some smaller players and getting more 3-point attempts? I think that's really exciting. So that being said, I think you lose some perimeter defense and floor spacing with those two together on the floor. And you're also taking, I mean, let's call it how it is. Like this Thunder team is very deep and talented. You're taking some additional talent off the court. But that's the last one I had, Jacob. I think you're spot on. Don't sleep on iHeart's ability to shoot 3 and space the floor a little bit this season.
I guess, because Hartenstein is here now, whose role is going to be impacted more? Of the Kenrich Williams or Big Jalen Williams?
J. Will, for sure. Kenrich kind of got cut from the rotation in the playoffs, which was surprising to a lot of us. just didn't have a great season last year. I think he'll be fine. I think he will still get time, especially at his size. Kenrich is like closer to 6'7". Really one of the only like quote unquote bigger wings on the team, even though 2 years ago, he played primarily at the 5 off the bench, but it'll definitely be Jay Will. I think Jay Will was already starting to get squeezed out last season. I think you'll see that even more. And to kind of wrap up this conversation of centers, the Thunder played 5% of all of their available minutes last year with 2 bigs on the court. I expect to see that number go up. I also think it's fascinating when the season was absolutely on the line. Last 3 minutes of Game 6 in Dallas, they went to a 2 big lineup. And so I think that probably tells you a little bit about what you can expect to see with Chet and iHeart, which is I think they'll share the court a decent amount of time together.
We kind of already touched upon like how big of a difference it is going from, I don't want to call him, he's not a non-shooter, but he's a non-floor spacer in Josh Giddey, to Alex Caruso, who is someone defenses respect. But Taylor, I think from watching Alex Caruso over the years, is even at his most aggressive, he's just overly deferential. Like when it comes to on his drives, he's probably overly looking to pass too much. His 3-point volume was at a career high per 36 last year, which was still just not all that high. It was still under 6 attempts per 36 minutes. Is there any concern there about that becoming an issue, or is it just you look at the surrounding weapons, you look at the way the Thunder space the floor, which is, based off his time in LA and in Chicago, those teams were not spacing the floor like this team does. And so do you expect that to not really be an issue?
I mean, obviously it's a concern. And I think the reason for that, it's not just Caruso as a player, but this team as a whole. That's something Jacob touched on earlier, and I was glad he did, because this was the specific I wanted to kind of dive into. Like, obviously, like all changes, there will be an adjustment growth period when you're adding guys like Hartenstein and Caruso, higher usage players than what some of these players currently on the Thunder are used to playing with. Like, there's going to be some growing pains, even if they're short, even if it works out best long term. But the Thunder as a team were 16th in 3-point attempts per game last season. Us fans want to see that go up significantly, not just Alex Caruso, but all these guys. We talked about J-Dub, talked about that being an improvement for Chet. So I don't think it's so much a focus for Caruso specifically, for this coaching staff and the organization, but it's going to be for the team as a whole. So hopefully, I think that's just going to be a focus heading into training camp. And so it's not just Caruso so much as the team entirely, in its entirety.
Jacob, because people like ranking things and making everything binary, who ends up being the more impactful addition for this team? Looking at next season specifically, because you could cop out and say Isaiah Hartenstein's under contract for at least one more year than Alex Caruso is at this point. But next season, who do you view as more important to this team's makeup?
Quick aside, that'll change.
Right, he's going to sign the extension, is my guess, if you traded for him. And also everyone's extension happy now because the players are like the Jared Allen extension after the Cavs threw him under the bus. But he probably was looking at free agency and like, oh man, like the open market is just, are these teams still going to be running scared? So yeah, he will sign an extension. But looking at next season, who do you anticipate, Jacob, having more value or having more of an impact for this team?
Oh, that's a great question. I would probably go Hartenstein.
God damn it.
Me
and Grant had this debate on a podcast we recorded earlier today, and he picked Hartenstein. And I went in detail as to how he was wrong, but now I'm just gonna edit that part.
I'm with Dan. So you go first, Jacob.
Maybe we have the same argument. I don't know, but I think Hartenstein, because Hartenstein is a 1-of-1 on this team. He is the only stereotypical traditional big. Chet is very non-traditional that this team has. Even Jalen Williams, J. Will, is undersized at 6'9", thicker body, but a little undersized. Where Caruso's incredible, but this team also has Lou Dort and Cason Wallace, who are a similar archetype player. And then you go further down the list, and you got and Aaron Wiggins, which I know we'll touch on in a bit. I know you have a bone to pick with me, Dan, and that's okay.
Not an actual bone, but yeah, I'm going to pretend to be infuriated and upset and offended.
Aaron Wiggins, the man who saved basketball. They have a lot of that archetype, right? The 6'3", 6'4", 6'5" wing / guard, who's just a bulldog defensively, and can space out and shoot threes. Because that position is a little redundant, which I think redundancy at that position is a great thing to have in the modern NBA. I think the bigger impact becomes iHeart because of the scarcity of that prototype on the team.
Okay, so that's very good points.
Now
I
let's hear
don't
the right
necessarily
answer, Taylor.
disagree with them, but here's the right answer. And Dan, I do want to hear your thoughts on this as well. But the main thing that stands out to me, there's a couple things why I think the Caruso signing will have the bigger impact. But the biggest thing for those listeners listening right now that didn't watch the Thunder religiously or don't tune into the Uncontested podcast after every post game, like some Thunder fans do, they're going to say the biggest hole, obviously was Josh Giddey, his fit with that starting lineup, him not being guarded from three and just being left open. But the thing is, it wasn't so much Josh Giddey being left open. It was the fact that opposing teams were putting their center on Josh Giddey. Mm-hmm. That led to some smaller but big, versatile defenders, forwards guarding Chet Holmgren, which he really struggled with and kind of led to that. I don't want to call it a decline, but obviously a big learning curve there in the second half of the season. And so when you have Caruso out there on the floor that has to be respected from three, you also obviously can't put your center on him. That allows Chet Holmgren to just be able to cook, especially if he's getting the ball out on the perimeter and can just take a center to the rack and get to the rim. The other thing there as well is I just think like when Shai would sit, one thing that the Thunder really needed was another ball handler. And the Josh Giddey, Dub, even that second unit, they weren't like Caruso's another player I think who can come in and take some of those ball handling, playmaking duties. I think that's going to be huge. And again, like I think very highly of Giddey as a player, but the Thunder getting Giddey for Caruso straight up without having to give up a pick is just absolutely absurd in the greater scheme of things. Like I just think Caruso will have a bigger impact overall on this team. He's already familiar with the organization too.
So my argument in a nutshell, well, Jacob made part of it for me before. He made mine better by saying that he could see Chet Holmgren being the best player on this team with Shai in a couple of years. I think you could honestly just boil it down to Isaiah Hartenstein plays your second or third most important player's best position. And so I think that's just going to inherently limit the amount of time he's on the court and that his impact is going to be more matchup dependent than Caruso's. The other point of my argument, though, was that Lou Dort has turned into, I don't mean to make this comp specifically, but defenses will now at least sometimes guard or react to what Marcus Smart is doing. Well, pre-Memphis, beyond the arc. Lou Dort has entered that realm and he shot the hell out of the three ball. But like when you're looking at Cason Wallace, who as of now, maybe that changes, he still feels like too passive to me offensively when looking for his own offense. So when you have that plus Lou Dort, who if his shot is off or his teams just decide like, yeah, we're okay with him making a couple threes. And so we're still going to leave that space. Caruso blends or takes up some of both of those weaknesses to where you don't lose anything defensively going from Dort to Caruso if that's a decision you have to make. And you definitely don't lose anything offensively right now going from Cason Wallace to Caruso. And so I probably didn't give enough consideration to what Jacob said, which is just the positional logjam there. But then I also looked at it from the perspective too of like you have real equity committed to Caruso where it's like, okay, Isaiah Hartenstein was just cap space. You gave up Josh Giddey, who was a very high draft pick. And I know it was the final year of his contract. He wasn't the right fit, but there is still sort of that equity perspective there. So, and that was the move like that you made, you clearly without, maybe you could have, you tampered maybe, but we didn't know Isaiah Hartenstein was coming at that point. So I look at that and that was where I was coming at it from. And I closed by saying, I think at the end of the day, when we look at the crunch time that the Thunder play next season, I think Alex Caruso will have played more total minutes, by a fairly well-sized margin compared to Isaiah Hartenstein. Maybe I'm wrong, but I think we all know I'm 100% right. So I feel like we can move on.
I mean, I think you're on. It's a lot easier to play Caruso in any situation than it is Hartenstein in any situation, especially when you have Chet on the team.
Can we appreciate how, I need to stop cursing on this podcast, how ridiculous this conversation is right now? Like you talk about embarrassment, like this is gold shoes are too tight territory. Where it's like, I mean, which of these fantastic fits is going to be the better fit?
They were fourth in defense last season. I think that number's going up. I mean, they're imagine being an opposing ball handler coming into Oklahoma City to play on the second night of a back-to-back.
No, you sit out.
Yeah, you like an injury. Like
we're going to start Lou Dort on you. If there's a switch, J-Dub or Shai are coming at you. Oh, thank goodness. One of those players are sitting. Here comes Alex Caruso and Cason Wallace. Like, just hellacious.
we've kind of already touched on this, but I want to know if you still consider it with given how what my actual biggest need for the Thunder is something they didn't address, which was that it could have been a wing, but someone with size who could create their own shot, table set for others, had like jiggle and joggle to the way he was with the ball, where it wasn't just straight line stuff. They didn't get that guy. But then you talk about the development of Chet Holmgren. You talk about the strides Jalen Williams has already made. You can probably make the case like they have two of those guys already on the roster. I just already considered J-Dub one. Jacob, do you still view that as through the lens of a longer term need that you're going to want this team to try and fill at some point? And if it's, we haven't gotten to the Nikola Topic of it all just yet, but like just in a nutshell or vacuum rather, like, do you still view that as something you want them to address somehow? Or is it like, no, like the answers are just on the team already?
Just to make sure I'm understanding correctly, you're saying a big wing who can do that, or a big wing or somebody who can do that?
I think it when you just look at the guard glut they have right now, I think it's a wing size, like a properly wing size player, like not 6'5" or under type.
Yeah. I think that's fair. I think 2 years ago, and I know we'll get to this one too. I think 2 years ago, they would have said, we've got that guy on the roster in the incubator in Ousmane Dieng. That is no longer the case. In my humble opinion, that is no longer the case. But I think you kind of took the answer from me when you mentioned Nikola Topic. I think advancements from Cason Wallace, you kind of have those guys already insulated on the roster. And like I led the show off with, even if that is like the quote unquote need, it's hard to say this team has a lot of needs right now, but if that's the last piece, I don't see like a massive consolidation trade to go get that guy who's already on a big contract filling that need just because of the current way the CBA is set up. The Thunder are 2 years away from the second apron. And when you're in the second apron, you are in trouble. And really the only thing you can do is develop and draft. Mm-hmm. Thunder are pretty damn good at both of those things. And they own everybody's first round pick for the next half decade. So
I mean, them in Utah rotating on and off the clock for the next few years. Yeah.
I don't see them consolidating those picks to go get that guy now. I think if that is the need that the team decides they need to fill, I think that comes via the draft, which, like we mentioned, they get the best of their own Houston or Clippers pick this season. Plus they have the top 10 protected Utah pick. Plus they have the lottery protected Miami pick this year. And I think this is the year that they have the top 4 protected Philly pick from the Al Horford trade.
2025, right? Yeah, 2025.
So
4 first-round picks.
4 first-round picks on the table, including a triple swap. So if that's the need they need to fill, they're going to have opportunities to do it in the draft.
The other thing that stood out to me about this team offensively, and I don't know that it was fully appreciated, their half-court efficiency improved by almost 7 points per 100 possessions. That is wild because when you look at the margins, like to use the Cavs as an example, they dropped from 7th in half-court efficiency to 18th, and the difference was like, their half-court efficiency declined by about 1.3 points per 100 possessions in the half-court. What did anything go into that other than just like, okay, J-Dub makes his leap and Chet's there to open up the floor, and that's just, it created all these other opportunities for anyone else? Was there anything, Taylor, that I'm just sort of missing here? It's like, how do you make that when you're already like, they weren't like caps lock that good, but like we knew the bones of what they could be. How do you make that big of a leap when you're not working from such an incredibly low baseline to begin with?
Well, I think that the Chet point cannot be overstated. I know a lot of people are probably like, that they hear that all the time, but it's true. Having a versatile big like Chet coming in this past year, especially with a year of just observing under his belt. He talked a lot about that this offseason, last during the regular season. He was interviewed about it. I mean, that's opened the floor so much more for players like J-Dub and Shai specifically. That being said, there's a couple other things too, like the versatility of this team. The Thunder's versatility and ability to just, regardless of who is on the floor, playing 1 through 5, being able to rip the ball off the rim and defense and push the ball in transition. They're incredibly great. In my opinion, I said this a lot on our podcast last year. I think they're at their best when they're playing in transition rather than in the half court offense. But when they are slowed down in half court sets, you have players like Shai and Dub who are so incredibly efficient, able to get to their spots. And I mean, that's just a cheat code. That's why you're going to see those numbers go up, especially when Dub's taking that leap. When you have Shai and Dub who are so efficient in scoring, especially when they're able to get to their spots, that's huge. But I think the last thing here is just the style of offense that Mark Daigneault's implemented. These are guys who are always going to make the extra pass and the right read. They're going to make that extra pass to get the open shot or a better shot than the one they already had, and also the off-ball movement. You talked about guys like Aaron Wiggins, Dan, Kenrich Williams. Doesn't matter who you're putting out there. These guys are great off ball. They're cutting, and you're going to have point guards and lead playmakers like Dub and Shai who are able to find those guys. That's what leads to that jump and the half-court efficiency, in my opinion.
I don't have any good questions about Shai Gilgeous-Alexander specifically anymore. Like, he's already, if you want to make the case, there are people that are making a case he deserved all defense this year. So if that's something you want to focus on, go ahead. I decided instead to go full. I don't watch the Thunder. Let's just ask this question. If I set the over under at 4.2 3-point attempts per game, we'll start with Jacob. For Shai next season, are you taking the over or the under on that?
4.2. Last year he took 3.6. Shai, every time he's had a break from basketball since his senior year of high school, he comes back with something new, something better. This time around, maybe it's the 3-point shot. So give me the over. I think they want this team taking a lot more threes. I think you're going to see more from Shai, Chet, and Dub specifically.
I agree completely. Like Jacob said, 3.6 this past season, and we know he's capable of taking more. On top of that, you're going to have better floor spacing this year. And you look at his averages, 2021, 2022 season, he averaged 5.3 3-point attempts per game. And 2020, 2021, the COVID year with Chris Paul, he's still a young up-and-coming player in the league. He had 4.9 3-point attempts per game. I think we're going to see closer to that 4.9 number this season.
I think what's going to be important to him hitting it, and it sounds like I would agree with the over based off the stuff you've said about, you guys have both said about the other players on this team, is the quickest way to get him more of those 3-point looks is like they need to come off the catch probably. And so like if that can become a higher share where doesn't need to dominate the ball as much, because Chet is doing this as a, not just as like someone with the ball, but as a playmaker, that J-Dub's doing this as a playmaker. If you trust defenses to overreact to Alex Caruso in the lane more, if Cason Wallace gets 10% better, Aaron Wiggins gets like 15% better, I think that opens up an opportunity for him to be off the ball a little bit more. And I think that's probably, and even with Isaiah Hartenstein there, if he's not involved in that primary action for some reason, that might be the most efficient path towards him hitting the over. And it's like, we've seen the volume before, but it was in a role, basically like those first 2 years in Oklahoma City, maybe the second one, but like the first year for sure, this was not anything like we've seen Shai Gilgeous-Alexander SGA play the past couple years in OKC.
For sure. Yeah, I could definitely see the over. He also, in the playoffs, got a lot more going to that step back, and I wouldn't be surprised to see that more frequently this season as well.
What are we looking for, Taylor, from Cason Wallace in year 2? Who this podcast put on their first team all rookie, because that dude just defends basically everybody. And as just, yeah, I'm not sure that we appreciated that, not you guys, but collectively, just he's a rookie. The Thunder were one of the 2 best teams in the NBA during the rookie. He's just a regular part of the rotation. Like for all these, the thing that I preach to fans when they get mad that like, oh, why would you grade the Lakers offseason so poorly? They got Dalton Connect. Like they upgraded the Taurean Prince minutes. You don't get to say that if you're trying to be a good team. And like, you don't just get to assume that from a rookie, and yet the Thunder fucking got it from a rookie.
Exactly. Sam Presti strikes again. You just, like you said, kind of the embarrassment of riches.
For me on that trade, by the way, I destroyed their cap management in like that thing. And then Cason Wallace is like, all right, doesn't fucking matter because the Thunder apparently know what they're doing.
And honestly, like even if they would have stayed put and taken Derek Lively, like a lot of people wanted to, they're probably in a great spot also. And we aren't talking about Hartenstein. We're talking about, how great the Caruso fit is. That's the exact perfect missing, like I think either way would have played out for them. But like you said, Sam obviously knew what he was doing. I think this past year for us, something uncontested, and for me specifically, the 3 things that stood out to me the most in order from Cason's rookie season was his confidence as a rookie, just like you mentioned, being able to get in big time, big game situations and not look like a rookie, looking like a seasoned vet in a lot of instances. Obviously his defense and then the 3-point efficiency in that order. But we've been talking a lot about this offseason at the Uncontested. There's a lot more to Cason Wallace's game. Can he unlock that with the log jam of like the depth of talent on this team? We'll see. That's something that you mentioned a lot so far throughout this podcast, Dan. But I want to see Cason Wallace with the ball in his hands a little more, and I honestly think we will. And I think the Thunder want to as well. You look back during his time with Kentucky, his freshman year, and I just completely went blank on who the starting point guard for them was, but that point guard got hurt. Cason took on those ball handling duties. So I think the playmaking and the self-creation with the ball in his hands, that's the next evolution of Cason Wallace's game. And to answer your question, I think that's what we'll probably see a little more of. We'll see how much, but a little more of this upcoming season.
What do we kind of make, though, of the, I don't want to just call it a guard glut, but it is a guard glut where it's okay. You have Aaron Wiggins, you have Isaiah Joe, both of them are on new contracts. You have Cason Wallace, you have Alex Caruso you're thinking about, or we're assuming they're going to keep. There's Lou Dort, there's Shai, and it helps that some of these guys can just slide up to the wings, and we should be living in the moment with them. But this is also just like, what is the end game here, Jacob? Like, there's no way they're keeping, especially with all these draft picks coming in. So are they getting rid of the draft picks? Are we just going to see some, not a mega everyone wants the Thunder still to make a consolidation blockbuster trade, but is it just they need to consolidate to make room for these bodies that are going to come in by way of the draft?
For sure. You also have Nikola Topic, who just came in the draft, who's also a guard and a lead ball handler. I think they bank a lot on, and Sam Presti said as much during both his exit interview and after the Giddey Caruso swap, is the size and the height listed on the roster doesn't matter as much to them as I forget what word he used, but the ability to defend. When you look at the Chicago Bulls, kind of like defensive breakdown, a lot of times Alex Caruso was guarding the 4 over Patrick Williams.
IO2, yeah.
Yeah. When you look at the Thunder last season, I mean, J-Dub was the permanent starter at the 4, even though Josh Giddey physically was bigger than him. And I think some of Dub's best defensive performances came against guys like Karl Anthony Towns, who are significantly larger than him. But their ability to guard up, I think, is one thing they have really wanted to emphasize and bank on. They've clearly changed directions from the first iteration of the Thunder, which was have 2 elite scorers and then fill the roster with long, rangy defenders who can run the floor and are super athletic, but maybe lack a lot of basketball feel. They now want everybody who can play point guard. Pass, dribble, shoot, having feel for the game is everything they look for. Chet Holmgren, Jalen Williams, Nikola Topic, Cason Wallace, Shai Gilgeous-Alexander. Like, you go down the list. They want guys with really high basketball feel who can make plays with the ball in their hand. Those guys tend to be guards, and I think that's kind of the way they're trending. It wouldn't surprise me if they don't make that 2 or 3 guards for the bigger wing trade, because I think they believe in some of these smaller guys to really be able to slide and defend up, and that creates mismatches for them on the other side of the court.
Taylor, what are the early impressions of Nikola Topic here? Obviously not going to be a factor this season, but he was mentioned in the same breath as top 5 pick candidates before he had that ACL injury. So what do you sort of make of just his game? Like, what are just early impressions, having obviously not seen him and definitely not going to see him this year, probably in the Thunder uniform?
So Nick and I like to get into the weeds of the NBA draft pretty early. So we scouted him a little bit. I will obviously say that Nick did a lot more legwork there. And then all of us collectively, obviously, once they picked him, we looked at a lot of film and just kind of broke down his game. And the thing that stands out the most to me about Topic is he's an elite ball handler, playmaker, but his ability to get to the rim is something that's incredibly impressive. It's very different than Josh Giddey in regards to he's just very athletic and is able to, he's a little more explosive, where Josh was a little more the kind of the herky jerky, the smooth, like utilizing his length to get to the rim. Topic is somebody who's just explosive off the dribble, coming off the pick and roll, attacks the rim immediately. That allows him to kick out to shooters and create for other teammates. But he's also a great scorer around the rim. He showed improvements with the 3-point shot. This is kind of a theme. You know, Jacob talked about the Thunder 1.0 is what we are kind of calling it now, right? Where you had Russ and KD, but then you drafted these freak athletes and hope that you could develop them into shooters. Now it's like you have these great feel high IQ players, but they also need to develop into shooters. And Topic kind of falls into that category, but he's shown a lot more promise, especially when you compare him to Josh Giddey. When Josh Giddey was playing in the NBL as a draft prospect in comparison to Topic overseas, I think Topic has a little more ability there. And I think he's just going to be another one of those players who obviously has the size in terms of height and his wingspan that's going to be able to come out and not only lead second and third units, if you want to call him that, as a lead ball handler and primary creator, but also play off ball with some of these guys like Dub and Shea. And that's the ultimate goal.
To jump back in here real quick, we started off kind of off the rails. We've had like 40 minutes of legitimate basketball talk. So it's time to take a break real quick. Dan, do you know?
I know exactly where you're going.
What Nikola Topic in one of these, like, I don't know if the NBA did it or if it was like a media company that did it, but they did one of those like rapid fire questions with the rookies. And they asked Topic what his favorite basketball movie is. Do you know what his answer was?
I have zero idea.
You got to guess. Take a guess. You have to.
I hope it's not Thunderstruck.
No, that's a good
guess. It was not. I'll give you one more guess, Dan.
What decade? How far back we going?
Early 2000s.
And our, well, saying in our lifetime is like all basketball movies. I don't know. Just what's a typical answer for a favorite basketball movie?
Hoosiers?
Do you have one? Hoosiers? Okay, that's another good guess. This man, in a very Eastern European accent, did not miss a beat. Didn't think, didn't wait, just fired off.
No smile.
Air Bud. It was best basketball movie. Air Bud. It's just that fast.
Didn't crack a smile.
Incredible.
Huge neck and all.
Brother is a diehard Air Bud fan. How can you not love him?
Might be a multi-sport athlete then too, right? Didn't Air Bud do soccer, football? What else he do?
Air Bud did everything. I think he went to space at one point in time.
No, did he? I didn't see that one. Holy crap.
Isn't that like the space buddies are like all of Air Bud's offspring going into space? I don't know.
Jacob, any early impressions of Dillon Jones other than we will probably never predict how his next 3-point attempt is going to be missed?
Dillon Jones just feels like a Presti pet project. Like they apparently wanted him last draft in the second round, but Dillon decided to go back to school at Weber State, stay another year, and bet on himself to go first round, which he did. The Thunder traded 5 second-round picks to move up to get him. Big dude, great feel, plays with the ball in his hands, not super athletic, but can make every pass, has a really nice polished offensive game, is a competitor. This is like the kind of, I call them the Presti pet projects. Holy shit. Say that 3 times fast. The Presti pet projects, because we've seen a series of guys in this mold that they have taken. None of them have panned out so far. But maybe Dillon Jones will be the one. The most recent one was Keontae Johnson out of Kansas State, who is now with Thunder East, a.k.a. the Charlotte Hornets. They keep going for like these stockier, like thick boy defender, can play with the ball in their hands, like jumbo-sized playmakers. Dillon Jones is the next in that line. They're hoping that time 3, 4. I mean, this goes all the way back to Deontay Burton was this archetype as well, right? I bet you haven't heard that name in a while. They have this, for some reason, that's an archetype that they like. They haven't struck gold yet, but eventually they will find their Draymond Green. I'm convinced of it.
I can't refute you. I think the Thunder have kind of just negated the concept of hyperbole, so I'll roll
that
with
is
it.
true. Hey, Dillon Jones is like my one draft pick I nailed in evaluation ever. I'm like 1 for 200 now, but I drilled this one.
He's like a Josh Giddey jump shot.
Yes, that's right.
They really would they trade 5 seconds to get him? I mean, they got them to spare, but so they clearly really wanted him.
Well, they
also have so many seconds they can never pick all of them. Correct. Ever. I mean, they can make 4 G League teams with the second round picks that they have.
Yep.
So they had to go somewhere eventually, right?
They promised that they were going to take him, or they told him they were going to take him in that second round, where they drafted a similar archetype in Keontae Johnson. It's no coincidence they picked him there, but Dillon Jones bet on himself and he wanted to be a first round pick. And we saw him at Weber State. And sure enough, the Thunder traded up for him and shipped, or didn't really ship Keontae off, but ended up cutting Keontae because Dillon Jones was their guy that draft.
Rest assured, I did watch some Ajay Mitchell film in advance of this podcast, and he looks like, to me, if TJ McConnell played with a moral compass. What are our early impressions of him? This one's for
I love
you,
that.
Jacob.
Yeah, that's fun. He's a fun player, man. He, again, really good feel, point guard, has a little bit of nasty to him, is very competitive, just continues to fit the bill of what they are looking for. A lot of people said that they reached for Dillon Jones. I'm not a huge draft guy. I don't get deep in the weeds because I fall in love with somebody and then the Thunder don't take them, and then I'm pissed off for the rest of eternity. Shout out Jarris Walker, forever in my heart. Eventually,
you may have dodged a freight train on that one. So
apparently, they don't like him very much. They keep just taking more 4s and 5s and not giving my man.
They view him as a wing, and I cannot wait to talk to Caitlin Cooper about this.
Yes.
But I don't see it. Like I don't see him as a wing, and I don't want to say I don't know what the Pacers are doing, but the way they view him seems very curious to me, but I'm sure she will enlighten me in some respects.
Agreed.
Caitlin's
Totally
the
agreed.
best.
And I think the Thunder are doing okay without him. Just like
For sure.
it might be a little all right.
But yeah, a lot of people said Ajay Mitchell was like high value for the pick that they got him at in the second round. They climbed that second day draft board pretty significantly to get there. They didn't have a second rounder. They traded Lindy Waters, and then they traded that pick to move up, and then that pick to move up. I think they moved up 2 or 3 times. So they had very clearly like zeroed in on him in that second round. And early results from watching him at Summer League, he seems like a fun player. He'll get a lot of G League burn this year.
Oh, he's not going to be like closing games for no.
Maybe he'll get some time over Lou Dort, but the guard glut, as you dubbed it, Dan, is a little too thick, I think, for AJ to get through.
All right, this one hurts. Are we selling our Ousmane Dieng stock, guys? Taylor,
So I'll kick us off and say yes, but I'm going to hand this over to Jacob, who's been leading the train, gone on his rants on the uncontested, and no better time for him to do it now.
I don't think you can sell the stock because I don't think you're going to get any money for it. That's
all you got. Come on, you've had better than this.
Then we need to get him to Brooklyn somehow, which is
I agree. I think he is falling into the God rest his soul, Alexei Pokashevsky mold, the Trey Mann mold. I think he could be good if he got some fight in him, and if he got an opportunity. That opportunity is just not there with this team anymore. 2 years ago when you drafted him, you were like, yeah, there's a long runway because this team isn't going to be very good. And then now they're second best odds to win the finals. So he needs a runway in a place like Brooklyn. I've said it for a year now. I think Ousmane Dieng could be a really good player. If like nothing would make me happier as a human being than to see Ousmane Dieng walk out on the court and just sucker punch the shit out of somebody. Just pull a Draymond Green and try to choke out Rudy Gobert. He needs some dog in him desperately. And I'm afraid there's just no dog. And without the dog, the skill just is never going to come out.
That's what I was looking for. Thank you, Jacob.
I still won't be able to get over the rookie year flashes of like, you can't contextualize the feel that it felt like he showed as like a connector at points. And so I'd like to see him
he's so
get
fluid
somewhere else.
Yeah. For that side, he's a legit 6'11".
All right.
Ship, I mean, like he had an incredible run in the G League Finals. He was G League Finals MVP, was assertive, driving to the rim, finishing through contact. But he just won't do that.
And then he went to then he went to the Summer League and got blocked 3 times by Darius Bazley. And at that, I know when something is so overcooked it is on fire, and when you get blocked 3 times by Darius Bazley in Summer League, the alarms are going off.
Jacob, would you care to tell me why Aaron Wiggins is the most overrated player in the NBA per your own opinion?
So the context was he is overrated because everybody has an article about him being underrated. To be clear, you said earlier on this podcast something about if Cason Wallace can get 10% better and if Aaron Wiggins could get 15% better, just for clarity, if Aaron Wiggins got 15% better, we're talking prime MJ. The dude is incredible. You want to talk about the ultimate role player. You need someone to come in and defend a wing, get Aaron Wiggins off the bench. You need someone to come in and hit some threes, get Aaron Wiggins off the bench. You need someone to come in and be like a secondary playmaker and move the ball, go get Aaron Wiggins off the bench. You need somebody to mop the floor after the game, go get Aaron Wiggins off the bench. The dude, the versatility of him is incredible. He's like a cult favorite in Oklahoma City. He does so much stuff. He fills so many needs. Whatever you need on any given night. I am not ashamed at all to say he is the best Wiggins playing basketball on planet Earth right now. He's so good that I think he's becoming overrated because so many people are now hopping on the Wiggins.
That was our argument on the podcast. If everybody says the most underrated player in the league is Aaron Wiggins, is he really underrated anymore? That was the whole discussion.
This is fun because I disagree strongly with you two here. I do feel sometimes, and not just, I'm not talking about you guys specifically, but people who cover or root for that specific team are looking at it through their lens of how exposed they are to that player and the discourse around them. I still would guess to you that if you polled general NBA fans who are trying to cover the entire league, Aaron Wiggins is not going to be someone that the average NBA fan knows a ton about. And that when you're talking about underrated players, I don't think you should ever be talking about. I mean, if you want to have the discussion, who's the most underrated player on their own team? And that's a separate discussion. When you're talking about underrated players in the NBA, excuse me, I think you more so have to view it from the view of 29 other fan bases rather than the team who he represents.
Totally fair. Totally fair. The dude's a badass.
He said the gimmick too is that he saved basketball.
Aaron Wiggins saved basketball.
Yeah. So congrats to Aaron Wiggins on saving basketball.
And a great contract as well. The Thunder paid him early in order to get a better deal. They could have just kept him on roster next year for like $2 million. Got the man his money earlier. And in turn got what was it? 5 years, 46,
5 years, 45, and a team option on the last year because why the hell not,
insane.
Right? Like,
insane.
Deal.
Even Isaiah Joe. I mean, you talk about guard screening. That dude, podcast favorite, Isaiah Joe. 4 years, 48, team option on the fourth year because of course, why not? So
isn't it wild that they got him off the buyout market because the Sixers cut him in camp?
Or conversely, is he really worth $12 million if Gary Trent Jr. can't get more than the minimum? Let's throw some negative Thunder takes here. Better player than Gary Trent Jr., but is he worth 13 times as much as Gary Trent Jr.?
Touche.
We did it. Are you ready to enter the cookie cutter portion of the podcast, fellas?
Let's do it.
Can't wait.
Okay, so the first cookie cutter question, Taylor, is for you. Is there anything about this team we haven't discussed yet that you think is not receiving enough, should I specify national attention so that we know that we're not viewing this necessarily just through the Thunder goggles?
This is a really tough question. We've covered a lot of ground. I'm impressed. Man, do you have something that comes to mind, Jacob? I'm trying to think of something good just for the sake of the podcast. I don't know.
We'll just say that I'm the best interview of all time. We covered
yes.
There's nothing left.
We're
best interviewer of all time. He's going to moderate the presidential debate here in a week. We have Dan Favale here.
Godspeed to Dan.
I think that's a good time to move right along. Okay, this question, I guess, is kind of fairly easy, but it's also not. The team is at full strength. You can only play 10 players. Collectively, can you two get to a consensus of who the top 10 are? I do feel like they might just have 9 locks, but I'm curious to see what you come up with.
Yeah, so Taylor, I think we both agree the starters are Shai, Dort, Caruso, Dub, Chet.
Yep. And then Hartenstein right there.
Bench is Hartenstein, Cason Wallace, Isaiah Joe, Aaron Wiggins.
Yep. So who's that 10th? That's
probably Kenrich Williams.
Nice. I got it. So I got this team right.
Boom.
When I go back and look at what I had penciled in for last year, and it was the Ousmane Dieng hope was still pretty high based off where we had.
Hey, I remember our pod last year. We were gassing the man up.
We were. And hey, look,
No
Don't be
regrets.
surprised. Don't be surprised early in the season when you see Oos get some of those minutes. He's the 10th man instead of Kenrich. We saw that last year. Not
Don't be
necessarily
surprised
with
when he
Oos.
gets that 10th man minutes and gets absolutely flamboyed.
It won't be much. It won't be much, but they're going to give him every last avenue to try and prove himself early in the season. We're talking like 4 minutes, maybe every once in a while.
He can come out to my Saturday morning pickup run if he wants.
That could have maybe been an under talked about thing about this team is I haven't seen it yet, but there are people that are going to say there's just too many guys. How are they going to figure it out? Mark Daigneault has just shown ever since he arrived in OKC, like that dude's going to figure it out.
Yeah.
And everyone's going to play. We're probably going to see what's his name? Is Malevi Leon's going to get any minutes? Didn't even know that was a real human being until like a couple months ago.
That makes 2 of us.
So I think
for what it's worth, we just talked through the 5 off the bench. Cason Wallace was 6th highest in minutes, total minutes played and minutes per game last season. And now you have Isaiah Hartenstein and Joe and Wiggins on those new contracts. Like, where does Wallace fit in there? Does he go up? Does he go down? Like, that's not a bad question to ask. Like, how do they get everybody minutes?
How did the Thunder simultaneously submarine the 6th man of the year case for 4 different players?
Yeah, that's right.
Very true.
Let's throw this one to, collectively, I think you can get here. I know it'll be matchup dependent. We already talked about this. We're fast forwarding to the end of the season. What will wind up being their most used crunch time lineup?
Ooh, that's a fun question.
I think it's going to be last year's starters minus Giddey, obviously, with Caruso in place. But Jacob and I earlier in the podcast talked about, you said Hartenstein might be the bigger impact player. So I was curious if you go Hartenstein potentially.
No, I'd go with those guys. I think I would say I think there's a chance maybe you sub out Lou Dort for a Cason Wallace or something like that. But I just think they trust Lou Dort so much. And late in those games, it's going to be matchup dependent, obviously. But that lineup is just going to terrorize other teams defensively. That you clamp everybody on one end, and then you have Shai and Dub go to work on the other end. I think that'll be their closing lineup for sure.
What would be the spot if you're looking at a player? And I think there's 3 locks, like the SGA, Chet, and J Dub are non-negotiable. Who would you see them futzing and fiddling with more in that situation? An Alex Caruso or a Lou Dort?
Between the two, that is so tough.
Like Lou Dort's like the staple, right?
Right, exactly. And they trust him on just about anybody one-on-one on the perimeter.
But Caruso's past 2 years, like all defensive team guy. I almost want to say Dort.
Would Lou Dort be if he were elsewhere? Imagine him on the Lakers.
I think if you were looking at it from an offensive perspective, Alex Caruso would probably make more sense. But there's Lou Dort just doesn't have a problem getting shots up, and there's 100%. Value in the volume as well as the percentage. Point. And so that's like a big difference maker. That's what I used to use Marcus Smart as an example of he's shooting 34, 33% from 3. He's had some bad seasons, but he's taking them. And defenses will react, maybe not all the time, but they will react to that. Caruso's a little bit more passive in that regard. So I actually do think it would be his spot they would mess with more. And also, how is Lou Dort? I said this about someone else, but he's first team all. Him and Hartenstein are first team all younger than you think that they are. I don't know if the Thunder have just had 80 different iterations under him, but Lou Dort feels like he's been in the league since 1985.
Yeah.
Yes. It's crazy. So many of those players feel the same way. But hey, just to spice this segment up a little bit so we aren't too cookie cutter.
Ben Shai?
Honorable mention. Yeah, Ben Shai. That's right. Nikola Topic coming back from injury. He's going to play. Don't sleep on Isaiah Joe. We saw him come in clutch time multiple times throughout last season. He's not going to answer this question, he's not going to get more clutch time minutes than Caruso or Hartenstein. Maybe more than Hartenstein. We'll see. But we saw Isaiah Joe play some big roles there. I mean, he was starting in the playoffs instead of Josh Giddey when they needed to make that adjustment. So Isaiah Joe's another one I would just give an honorable mention.
I love this question, usually more than our guests. We'll start with you, Jacob. What is a weird, funky, offbeat lineup you would like to see?
Oh, I love this.
Next year? This is a great.
And the Thunder have so many
weird, funky, offbeat lineup that I want to see this season. Let's go.
Cason Wallace at center.
Queso, Lou Dort, Alex Caruso, Jalen Williams, J-Dub, and Isaiah Hartenstein.
Ooh.
Just for the defense.
That's where I was leaning.
I mean, that's just a bunch of dogs. Those are some dogs that are just going to get after it. That would be a bunch of thick boys too. We mentioned the thick boys earlier. Like that's a lot of meat on the court. I'm kind of into that lineup. I think that could be a really fun one.
I like that. That's where I was heading as well. It's like an all defensive kind of lineup there. But let's get fun. And let's just say we throw out a bunch of size out there. Give me Chet. Give me Isaiah Hartenstein. Give me Dillon Jones. Give me J-Dub. There's 4.
Ousmane Dieng.
And Ousmane Dieng. All the length, all the size. Just
I was dying last season for the skinny boy lineup of Chet, Poku, Dieng all on the court at the same time.
Didn't you call them the Holy Finity? I remember dying. I don't know if I saw it or if I heard you guys say it, but I was dying.
I don't think that was me, because if I said that, the shirts would have been printed. I promise you that.
The Holy Finity's good. We had the Thin Tower shirts going last year. We did have those.
I think, honestly, let's put this whole Thunder, they don't care about the size of their players thing to the test. So give me Alex Caruso, give me Cason Wallace, give me Lou Dort, give me Aaron Wiggins, and I'm torn between, who did I say? Dort, Caruso, Cason Wallace, Aaron Wiggins, and like, I'm torn between, let's just put Ousmane Dieng at the 5, or is it like, do we really?
Kenrich Williams?
Kenrich Williams is like an actual 5. I need to pick someone who's not an actual 5. Like, he's played 5. So I'm just going to go with, I'll pick a real NBA player, though, here to round out that lineup. I guess J-Dub? Like, that's just, I mean,
that's just insane length. Nobody's getting in passing lanes.
I trust Caruso, and collectively Caruso, Wiggins, and Dort. They'll figure out a way to defend some traditional big men.
Oh, yeah.
And you know what? Let's take it a step further. Let's roll that lineup out against Minnesota's starters.
Yes.
Hey, the Thunder love to play the J-Dub, Kenrich Williams front court against those Minnesota starters.
So there you go. I just solved.
And it worked.
Yeah, there we go. So let's see it. Okay, Taylor, as we record this, the Thunder's over-under is set at 57.5. It was 56.5. Excuse me, I misspoke. Are you taking the over or the under?
Look, I do believe there's going to be the Thunder fans, because there is with every fan base, that maybe they get off to a little bit of a slow start because there's the growing pains of trying to incorporate new players, new big-time players, and Hartenstein and Caruso. Thunder fans aren't used to that, this iteration of the Thunder. That being said, I'm hammering the hell out of the over. I think they're going to be 59 or 60 wins. Easy.
Jacob.
Even in the West.
Give me the under. And the reason I say that is because they had really, really good injury luck last season. Knock on wood, like I hope to God every NBA team stays healthy. It's just an inevitability that somebody gets hurt at some point in time. So because of that, because of like that, a little bit of that newness being gone, and teams definitely have them circled on the schedule now, give me slightly under.
I haven't really revealed my over-under picks because we haven't done our collective podcast yet, but we did do a segment where I predicted that the Thunder are going to win at least 65 games next year. So I'll be hammering the over. And here's my thing.
You're going to co-write some Thunder fan
games.
They have these different dynamics on offense. Now, if they had the whole wing thing, someone who's 6'6" or taller who could create like another guy of that, I'd feel better about this. But you could tell me that Shai's super fatigued from playing in the Olympics, or that J-Dub for some reason is fatigued, or that I don't want to throw the injury manifestation out there, but they could be missing their 2 best players on any given night. And the depth is just so absurd that the defense is never going to be an issue. But I do think they have enough to figure out how to score efficiently, independent of their 2 most important offensive players right now, who are J-Dub and Shai. And that just sells it for me. Is that okay? Even if there's fatigue, and you know what might be fair? There could be a drop off from Shai from a top 2 MVP candidate. Like there's not really much where there's more room for him to go down than there is to go 100%, up at this point. And it just doesn't matter. So I'll be somewhat shocked if they don't hit the over and like their relative, like you would need to, like the mothership would need to come and call half this roster home for them to not hit the over.
It'd have to be like the plague of Egypt system or season is what we called it back when KD was hurt, Russ was hurt. Who else was hurt? Jacob?
Ibaka was hurt. Everyone
was hurt. Perry Jones was getting like 60 minutes a game. Like it's just
That was the Sebastian Telfair season.
yes.
That tells you anything.
Good
Pre-guns.
Which are, I normally ask, where did these teams stack up in the conference, but I think we know where the Thunder stack up. So, Jacob, what are some of the teams that you think, if you had to pick one, and Taylor, you're not going to be allowed to pick the same one, so I'm giving you the short shrift here because you're going second. What is the team that you look at as the most intriguing or most concerning, problematic matchup for the Thunder?
Oh, that's a great question. So,
Mavericks fans will be mad if you don't pick them.
Mavericks fans have been mad at me for forever. So I have no problem with that at all. I think the Thunder match up way better with the Mavericks now than they did at the playoffs last season. And let's be very clear. The Thunder were 3 inches of a Shai Gilgeous-Alexander leap for a corner 3 from taking the Mavericks to Game 7 in Oklahoma City when they shot like incredibly inefficiently. Like it's not like the Mavericks blew them out in that series. It was a very, very, very close series. I think the Thunder match up even better now. I mean, now you throw out Dort on Luka and Caruso on Kyrie Irving, and you are able to slide Dub over to PJ Washington, who's probably not going to shoot that well again in his entire lifetime. I think the Thunder matchup, I'm intentionally fueling the Dallas hate here. I want to manifest it. I'm going to say the Minnesota Timberwolves.
What is it about them that you think is?
Am I allowed to? I mean, I've already said the S word a few times.
I've dropped way too many F-bombs on this podcast anyway. We're at the point where like Apple, like we don't check it, but we're automatically just listed as explicit now. Yeah, like the transcription is just filled with profanity.
Why is that a worry? Anthony fucking Edwards is a worry. That dude is an absolute killer. Their size is really good. I mean,
yeah, they've got, what's interesting about their dual size is they have dual heft, and neither of their big men like move like a hefty big man. And definitely Karl-Anthony Towns for sure when you look at what he's able to do, like going north-south.
And he really impressed me in the playoffs. Cat did. Like he shed a lot of negative stereotypes for me in the playoffs this year. He played with a lot of toughness. He really showed up for the moment. And I think Jaden McDaniels is disgustingly good, especially defensively.
On one end of the floor, yeah, for sure. But
yeah, I think that length can really give a guy like Shai Gilgeous-Alexander problems. So I'm going to go Minnesota. I'm not worried about Memphis. Minnesota would be the team that I would say poses the biggest threat to Oklahoma City. And I would not be surprised to see both of those teams in the conference finals this year.
Taylor, can't be the Timberwolves now.
I like that Timberwolves answer. But if we're not talking playoffs and just regular season, the Thunder were only 1-3 against the Lakers last year. And they really struggle with that size and physicality down low. I know. That's not somebody who's going to worry me in the playoffs, but it is somebody they
make the playoffs.
Right.
What I will say, I don't think the Lakers are a real threat to anybody right now, but if they have a healthy Gabe Vincent and Jared Vanderbilt, like they can play some like really nasty defensive lineups that I think will give a bunch of teams problems. I am surprised that you picked them though, Taylor, with all that.
I was just thinking regular seasons, trying to go through the stats.
You had the 2-time MVP Nikola Jokic to pick.
3-time MVP.
Sorry, 3-time. I'm sorry.
Denver Nuggets is the other team behind.
I'm also manifesting the Denver hate apparently as well.
Well, and again, like anybody else up there, it'd probably be the Mavericks, but I do feel more comfortable with them, like Jacob mentioned. So Denver Nuggets in the playoffs, sure. Regular season, though, I want to see the Thunder take care of the Lakers. They did not do so last season. I want to see them do so this year.
I actually think I do agree with you that they match up better. This is more directed at Jacob with the Mavericks than they did last season. I also think the Mavericks match up even better with the Thunder now than they did last season because
That's a good point.
They're fucking huge. They can get to lineups where Luka, like if you pull Kyrie Irving off the court and just throw Najee Marshall in there, Luka Doncic is the shortest player on the floor, which is wild.
Now, I don't want to make this a Dallas pod. I think Dallas also got much worse defensively.
Ooh, no. I mean, maybe we'll have to revisit that. There's no way. Najee Marshall is really freaking good. And Derek Jones, you want to go the Aaron Wiggins route with this? His defensive impact was just overinflated because He was over indexed at one point. They made the trade that got them PJ Washington, Daniel Gafford. So you had like a 48 minutes of solid rim protection. That's when Derrick Jones Jr. started to shine. And I also believe that Quentin Grimes is probably one of the most underrated additions of the offseason, because for the first 2 years of that dude's career, all he did was defend at the point of attack, do it really well, and knock down threes. And so I would say, is there a chance they got worse defensively relative to them finishing 6th after the trade deadline or whatever it was? Maybe. But I framed it as, and maybe I'll be wrong, I'm wrong all the time. When we go back and regrade the offseason, it is a bloodbath on my end. So that's the caveat. They improved the offense without getting worse defensively. To your point, though, and I'm really just messing with you. All the credit in the world. I don't know how well they're going to defend when you have Clay, Kyrie, and Luka on the court at the same time. I think it's going to take a lot. We've seen Luka defend okay at points. We've seen Kyrie, like when he gives a damn, like that's someone who will fight. Like, can they maintain that more consistently? So that will be fascinating. But I think between Quentin Grimes and Najee Marshall, shame on the Pelicans for just letting him walk, because who wants to pay the luxury tax, right? I honestly think like Dallas is, I saw they just made the NBA finals, and I feel like people are sleeping on them.
Yeah.
I think that's a fair point. That also, again, just channeling the inner hater. I don't know if I'm as high on Najee Marshall as you are. You would be way more knowledgeable about that than I am. I really worry about Klay Thompson being able to just move defensively. I saw Klay up close and personal last season. The injuries to the left leg, was it the left leg? Just devastating. Like whenever you watch him like up close and personal, that left leg is like significantly smaller than the right leg. There's the muscle atrophy. I worry it's going to catch up to him even more than it did last season, but he'll kill you from 3. I mean, he can make up for it on the other end for sure.
Yeah, I mean, 2 devastating injuries, Achilles and ACL, is just like
back
not everyone. Kevin Durant is coming back and still top 5 player playing the best defense of his career by the end of last season. Guys, I kept you for 90 minutes on this podcast. Is there anything?
I think we kept you for 90 minutes, Dan, but
is there anything that we didn't discuss? Any takes you would like to get off before I let you skedaddle?
I mean, I'm surprised we haven't talked about the G League team yet, who won the G League title. But
yeah, that's right. Let's go through the OKC Blue roster.
How much Mitchell getting this year? What's his steal rate going to look like? Predictions over under a 4.
Hey, this is the most.
I have a serious one and a fun one. So you go, Jacob.
This is the typical Taylor. Dan, you had the opportunity to reel him in. You didn't do it. I was going to say this is the most thorough and exhaustive Thunder preview I have done. Kudos to you, Dan. I could not cover all 30 teams at the level of detail that you do. You sent us this outline, and I'm like, shit, who does the Thunder podcast here, Dan or me? So there is nothing else I could add. Taylor, for the love of God, brevity, please.
Hey, I could not agree more. When you sent that outline over, I was like, usually I can just jump on and like give my takes for Thunder previews and we're good to go. And I saw these, I was like, I need to have some bullet points down. But for the sake of this, I mean, that's so boring if I don't have an answer. So in typical Taylor fashion, I have 2. The serious one being, even though Hartenstein is on the team, do not overrate the Thunder still going to small ball, in that being their go-to with no true center. They've had success with that in the past. Mark Daigneault's not going to go away from that just because they have 2 quote-unquote centers on the team. That's my serious one. Second one, I'm going to leave the listeners
very quickly,
with.
As someone who is in favor of building the Kenrich Williams statue, I'm very much glad to hear that sentiment.
We'll see some of it on occasion. My second one, I'm just going to leave you with, we did a conspiracy theory offseason podcast, and my Thunder-related one, because you guys have alluded to it already. You talked about the Charlotte Hornets, the Thunder East, but there's also another team, the Washington Wizards. Now, the Thunder recently just hired, the Charlotte Hornets just hired a Thunder scout to like head in their scouting department. And we've seen all the Thunder players going over to the Hornets. We've also seen the Wizards ran GM and president of B-ball ops, 2 former Thunder staffers under the Sam Presti tree. Sam Presti is playing chess, not checkers, Dan. These are 2 farm teams from the Oklahoma City Thunder. When the Ousmane Diengs and the Pokus and the Trey Mans can't get time here in OKC, we're sending them elsewhere to develop. When we can't draft Bilal Coulibaly because he's going too high, we have Will Dawkins do it for us and develop him. And soon enough, we're going to trade for him.
So they're all
Chestnut
just like
checkers.
E-League affiliates,
farm
of the
teams.
NBA league affiliates of the
That's right.
Thunder
It's just
now.
like EPL or not EPL, just like international soccer, where you have these like main clubs and they have all these other clubs sprinkled throughout.
How do they go about getting them back then, though? What does that look like?
I mean, you saw the
He
Alex
hasn't-
Caruso for Josh Giddey straight up trade, right?
You can after this podcast, you
Ousmane
can
Dieng for
catch,
Koulibaly.
you can catch Taylor on InfoWars next, folks.
That's right, with my tinfoil hat on. And I will leave you all with that.
So can you guys, we'll start with you, conspiracy theorist number one, Taylor. Can you tell our listeners where they can find you on social media? And then Jacob will let everyone know where they can just find all the fantastic work. You guys said a lot of kind words about me. I appreciate it. I'll Venmo you afterwards for the paid promotion of that. Well, I do these look-aheads. They're terrible for business, but great for my ego. Everyone's always so nice. So thank you guys. But Taylor, are you able to just tell our listeners where they can find you?
Yes. So I promise I don't actually have conspiracy theories all throughout my Twitter account, but you can find me on at Twitter at Jacob Begs to Differ, at Taylor_P15. I'm Taylor with an E. I have a weird spelling. And obviously you can find us at the _uncontested on socials, as well as our YouTube account, which we really have leaned into over the past season, putting a lot of great content out. I'll let Jacob take it away with his personals and also a little more details about the uncontested.
Yeah. I am at Jacob Kniffen. It's Kniffen. I don't know. My Twitter's a shit show, so come enjoy the ride. We do Thunder podcasts every Wednesday and Sunday night, and then once the season gets here, every post game. So if you are interested in following along with what should be one of the most exciting teams in the league this year, no more the black eye of the NBA, come hang out. We would love to have you guys along for the ride this season.
I echo everything you said. You can find links to the Uncontested YouTube and audio podcast in our own podcast and YouTube description. Thank you guys so much for your time. Love the Uncontested. I do listen to it religiously so I can figure out a way to get offended and then bring it full circle and accuse you guys of sub talking me. I guess that's called throwing shade. What do the kids call it? They throw things around like who has the most Riz on the Thunder.
Hey,
that was a fun topic. So
the
go
Rizzler
subscribe to the
himself.
Uncontested. Thank you guys so much. And as you know by now, I will be hitting you up down the line.